everyone. For episode number 44, we had Brian Giamo. He's the CEO and co-founder at Activate. He's been running Activate for over 9 years, which is impressive for a technology company. And he's been in the industry for over 20 years, previously being a consultant in the equipment world. So he knows the industry, he knows software, he knows technology. We talked about their vision, their North Star for what they're building on Activate, which is it really takes a village to raise a piece of equipment, and the future of equipment is connected. So we talked a lot about their technology, their platform, their vision, how they've come this far. If you're interested in another technology story, someone who's working actively in the rental space, I think you'll enjoy this episode. All right, everyone, welcome to the Rental Roundtable, episode number 44. Got Brian Giamo, CEO and co-founder of Activate. Brian, thanks for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. Appreciate it. Appreciate you having me, and excited to have the conversation for sure.
I love rental companies. That's near and dear to my heart. Number one. 1B, I love software entrepreneurs who work in the equipment space because that's the world I'm in. So I'm excited for this conversation. You're a software entrepreneur. I think about 9 years in at Activate. Is that right?
Yeah, it's been a time and 20 plus years in the industry. So
yeah,
time flies, right? when you start to see people that you worked with in your customers, they're starting to send their retirement party invitations out. You've been around for a while.
Yeah, I mean, it's a small industry. Time goes fast. I've been doing this 4.5 years. So you got twice the experience at Activate and many more years on top of that in the industry. So I love hearing origin stories around how you started in the, Activate, and then obviously before that, your experience in the rental industry. Excited to dive in here. Just remind me before we get started, where in the world are you? Are you New York City, that area?
So we're just outside of New York City. We're in New Jersey, Red Bank, New Jersey. That's where I'm calling in from today, the Garden State.
All right.
So
Garden State. Are there's drones still flying around? Like, that was all in the news for a while. Then it's like I haven't heard anything.
I haven't seen any today. But I do have a Ring doorbell, and the Ring doorbell often goes off, and people said there's drones flying overhead, and scary stuff happening. I try not to pay attention.
Yeah. Well, we have a whole separate episode on what the drones were. That's not for today. But so Brian, let's jump in. Tell me about your story here, how you got into the equipment industry and then eventually getting to Activate. Like, tell me how the last 20 years, how you got started.
Yeah, so I, way back in 2002, 2003 timeframe, co-founded a consulting business. My background was in go-to-market strategy, planning, customer research. And shortly after I founded the business, a former client of mine in Caterpillar Corporate reached out and said, hey, we're having some challenges in how we help our customers better manage equipment and keep it up and running. And so after the sale, so everything that happens to an asset between, acquisition and divestiture. And that wasn't just, owned equipment, that was rented equipment as well. And so that really kind of kicked off my experience in the industry, and worked with a lot of great people at the manufacturer level, but quickly started to work with equipment dealers, rental companies, and their customers, and seeing the challenges that they faced in, maximizing uptime and reducing owning and operating costs, and started to realize that there was, just some gaps, and some pretty major gaps in that space, especially on, the fleet owner side, going onto job sites and seeing, rental assets that were sitting idle, or equipment that was down and you couldn't start production, or minor issues that turned into major costly problems for the customer, all of which that could be avoided. And so we really founded Activate with that idea in mind, is to say, how do we drive that outcome? How do we drive maximum uptime for equipment? And how do we help these fleet owners, reduce their owning and operating costs? And, ultimately we came away with a couple of truths, but the one, truth that we came away with was that it's a team sport, right? So whether you're renting an asset or whether you own the asset, it's not just you as let's say a construction company that has that responsibility, but it's the company that rented it to you as well, or the company that sold you that piece of equipment. And there's this collaboration. I always like to say it takes a village to raise a piece of equipment, and really there's a lot of different stakeholders involved in that. So It's everybody from, let's say your rental company that rented it to you to maybe somebody you're getting oil sample data from to maybe you're getting, uh, trade value data from folks, bringing all that together so that you can, like I said, maximize that uptime and reduce, your owning and operating costs for that asset.
Mm. I love your point around the team sport here. We published, Quipli did a few weeks ago, our state of rental report for the first time. We interviewed over 50 different rental companies, and we found that only 16% of rental companies had fully integrated systems that talk to each other, right? And
Yeah.
that's a problem, right? 16%, you know that. That's probably why you started your company. And it's not that, I don't know, it's interesting. Like, I think there's an element that maybe some software companies don't necessarily want to play nice, or maybe they don't know how to integrate, et cetera. But like, it really is. It's a team sport, as you said. It takes a village. I'm curious, like when you're starting Activate, which was what, 2016, around then?
Yeah, yeah, it really kind of started as more of a project
Yeah.
underneath the consulting business, and then we spun it out as a separate company eventually. We had a lot to learn, and if when you're trying to bring it's together those multiple stakeholders,
Mm,
it's challenging. And like you said, one of the challenges is the tech stack. And
mm,
so a lot of folks approach the tech stack like, hey, we're going to integrate different point solutions, and we're going to integrate an
mm,
ERP, which I think is okay, that works. But I think the better way to approach it, or the more fluid way to approach it, both for let's say the provider, the rental company, right, or their customers, the construction company, is as an operating system, right?
mm,
So it's not an enterprise rollout of software. It doesn't become cumbersome from that perspective. It's not about the clicks on the screen. It's really about this workflow, shared workflow that these guys have, right? From the
mm,
time an asset is rented, that rental experience that happens through to, when you're going to take something off rent, or, when you need to prep for the next job. And if you think about it like that as an operating system, you start to think about how data moves differently, who needs what information at what time.
mhm,
You start to address the critical few versus the trivial many, right?
mm. So for our listeners who are hearing about Brian and Activate for the first time in 2025, there's been multiple iterations, I'm sure, going back 9 years. Where is Activate today? And if I'm a rental company, how does Activate help me, run my rental business more profitably with better customers, higher retention?
Yeah.
How does Activate help me?
Yeah. So it's really about driving a better rental experience
Mm,
for your customers. Like I said, from the time that you rent the asset to the time it comes off rent. I'll give you an example. We're working as the equipment management solution on a large joint venture project. And we've partnered with their main rental provider on that project. It's about 70% rental on that job. There's about 1,200 assets on it. And so what we've done for the rental company, we've helped them take their share from 50% to 85% on that job by
mm,
giving them real-time visibility into what's going on with those assets on the job, and making it a lot more efficient and effective for them to be able to service them.
mhm,
And also ensuring that, a lot of their customers will, because they can't get the service out of the rental company in a timely fashion, they'll work on the equipment themselves and either eat that cost or try to recoup it at, some later point in time. And that's just not a great experience. So, as a rental provider, you want and need that real-time information. For example, when one of your customers, does their operator walk around in the morning and notes that there's an issue, you want to be able to see that there's an issue with your rental asset right then and there, rather than hear about it 2 hours later or 3 hours later and only get partial information. So we're really, equipping the rental company with this real-time visibility, real-time access, and real-time ability to act on the things that the rental assets need while they're in operation.
Mm. And how do you guys actually do that from a technology perspective? Are you integrating with multiple telematics companies? Like, I imagine you guys are. You've said operating system a few times, right? So, and you talked about it takes a village. You have to plug into many different systems and telematics companies. How do you guys do that on a job site with multiple manufacturers, multiple different telematics companies, right? I mean, how does Activate pull all this together?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we've built out what we call our integration hub. So we have, dozens of out-of-the-box integrations, like you
Mhm.
said, with multiple telematics providers. On this job in particular, as an example, we're integrated on the fleet owner side, the renter side, with VisionLink, with JD Link, with Samsara, and we're pulling all that information into a single pane of glass. And we're making it actionable and getting it in the hands of the right people on that job site. And on the rental provider side, we're integrating back into things like their rental systems, right, or their dealer business systems. So we're connected back into that side as well, so that you can complete that entire workflow, right?
Mm.
Um, and that's really, critical for us. And, integrated with point solutions as well, things like time carding apps or oil sample data, um, inspection applications, got a great integration with Cat Inspect. Um, so where we realize that, like I said before, this is an operating system,
Mhm.
and it's not this, monolithic enterprise um, software rollout, right?
Yeah.
This is really about workflow, data access, and ultimately communication between the job site and the provider. And in this case, that's the rental company.
Mm. Yeah, so like I can imagine for a simple brain like myself, right? I got my iPhone, I got all my different apps, right? You guys are almost the iPhone that allows you to download the different apps that can all sort of work together, right?
Yep.
I imagine a lot of the value you guys add is taking these every single manufacturer, every single system has a different data format, the different integration, right? You have done all the work to bring all that into one place. Right.
Yep.
So if you're a rental company and maybe even an end user, right? If I'm on a job site, I now have access to all of my data in one spot. Is that right?
Yeah, 100%. And if
Yeah.
you're a rental company, you get to see all of your customers, right? So
Mm,
you have this visibility, and we almost liken it to an air traffic control, right?
mm,
So, as that rental company, you can see all the planes moving, right? You can see all of your rental assets in the field as they're operating. You can see, when a maintenance event is going to come up, you're going to get alerts and
mm,
get visibility to that. You can see when an operator reports an issue with the asset. Let's say it's making a weird noise, or all of a sudden, it's an issue where it's unsafe to operate. You can see when they down the equipment, and then you can dispatch, right? So you can
mm,
dispatch your technicians, your folks out to that site. Um, in near real time from when that event happened. So, if I were to put my hat on as a rental company, it makes your experience from you so much faster, better than your competitors. Um, Customers, typically who are connected, our fleet owner customers who are connected to their rental companies are saying, hey, these guys are providing better, faster service, and my rental experience is so much better and easier with these guys because we're connected to them through Activate.
mm. So you're essentially taking all of the data across all these different systems, putting it into one spot, air traffic control, and I'm a rental company. I wake up every day. I can see where all my assets are. I can see fault codes. I can see utilization levels. That data allows me to serve my customers better. So when in real time something breaks, I know where it is. I know what the issue is. Because without Activate, I got 5 different systems. Like we talked about earlier, like 16% of rental companies that we talked to have a fully integrated system. So the 84% are in this world of 10 different things going on, right? And if you're doing that, it's hard to serve your customers well because you don't know where to track and you got too many, everyone's swivel sharing with 1,000 different things. What you guys have done is simplify things to give all the data, the most important data in one place, which ultimately allows the rental company to serve their contractors better. Is that right?
Yeah, 100%. And so, not just, the equipment that you've rented them, but also when they have a need coming up,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm,
You can also see when your customers are spinning up their next job site, right?
mm,
You can also see, when something's coming to the end of its rental period and that something's going to go off rent, right?
Mm.
And you can extend the rental period. So there's beyond just service, making sure the equipment is serviced while it's being rented. There's a whole opportunity, and our rental company customers are taking advantage of having that visibility to the customer to serve their next rental need, right? So
Mm.
that
You
the
can start
next
predicting, you can start to see when things are moving towards them, and you're right there. Uh, Interesting. That's interesting idea. When I heard United Rentals talk at the Future Rental, I think 2 years ago, one of the things they were talking about in their customer portal, which was pulling all their data in for their customers, was they could, and then they could also say, hey, you haven't touched this piece of equipment in 2 months and it's sitting at 0% utilization. We actually think you should off rent this because we want to be a good partner to you. And like you're spending money on things you're not even using. That's a little like you have to really take a long view of business and to like, essentially
Yeah.
you're betting on the relationship. Do you ever see rental companies doing that? Like now that they have this data saying, hey, not only can we help you with maintenance, not only can we predict where your next job needs to be, but we're actually going to say you don't need to rent this piece of equipment because you haven't touched it in 2 or 3 months. Do you ever see people doing stuff like that?
Yeah, 100%. And I think they're coming more to terms with, bad, what I'll call bad revenue. Um,
Yeah.
because ultimately, if something's sitting idle and it's like, man, we wasted all that money renting that piece of equipment, right? That's going to have an effect. And we see it with because we serve both sides, right? We serve the fleet owner
Yeah.
and we serve the rental company. Our fleet owners, even though it may not be completely rational, um, they don't get so excited when they have a bunch of rental assets that have been sitting idle. They almost feel like the rental company should have told them, right?
Mm.
Um, so there's this expectation, on the fleet owner side that, or the renter side, that my provider, my rental company who rented this to me should have informed me that it was sitting idle. They're tracking the equipment, right? It's their asset. They share responsibility, and this kind of comes back to this, co-managing equipment, and this it takes a village to raise a piece of equipment. This is part of the expectation, and a big part of the expectation that sits on the side of the renter or the fleet owner.
Mm. I mean, a lot of the independents, as you know, they win on service and they win on trust. I mean, can you imagine getting a call from your rental company and saying, "Hey, look, we're happy to keep renting this aerial that you've had on site. You haven't touched it in 2 months. Like, why don't we go pick it up today? We'll call off the rental. We want to save you money." I mean, can you imagine getting that phone call? You go, "Okay, this guy, like, they're looking out for me," and I know that in the future. These guys have my back. I trust them. I think if you're playing a much longer game, this data that you're pulling together and activate allows the rental company to build even more trust with their renters, right?
Yeah, and our rental companies are doing that today,
Yeah.
right? Because we're giving them that visibility through Activate. So our rental company customers are doing that today with their customers. The construction companies, they are making that phone call. Hey,
Mm.
we see this asset, it's been sitting idle, it's on this job site. Because typically what they're finding is that interaction that they're having ends up leading to way more revenue for
Yeah.
other things just
Mm.
because they're having that interaction. So yeah, while they lose the rental revenue on that particular asset, which we're calling, bad revenue, um,
Mhm.
they're gaining it back in that conversation, because typically what it leads to is, oh yeah, but you know what? We were just thinking we have to rent, these three other things
Mhm.
for these other jobs that we're working, right?
Mhm.
So you lose the one to gain, two or three or four, um, other opportunities.
Yeah. That's the whole idea of serve before you sell that Elliot Mitchell's talked about before, right? And
Yeah.
that's how you build a great long-term business. You're not cutting corners. And I think the other thing that's interesting, I've only been in this industry since 2020. Uh, I've seen how much people are moving more towards a transparency model, right? Like for us, like people were very hesitant to put rental prices on the website because, well, I got these different rates, right? Well, that's now changed. I think the other thing we're seeing change is the importance of a customer portal, right? United and Sunbelt have this, but the idea that you can go in and see where all of your rentals are, you can request extensions costs, you can see a history of all of your payments, right? Rather than hiding from it, we're going to give all the data out to our end users. I'm encouraged by how much the industry has changed in the last 5 years, moving towards this transparency model. Because I think the leading companies know that they know that if we lead with transparency, we can build trust, ultimately build longer term relationships with customers, ultimately build a better business. That you're not competing on price. That's sort of something you guys you probably were on pretty early, right? 2016, you started to see this vision of like we actually need to connect the data, surface it to the users, surface it to the rental companies. That's something that you were sort of on earlier on. I'm curious to kind of go back to the beginning though with Activate, like how many different pivots have you guys had? Because oftentimes, like people heard me talk, 91% of software companies don't last 3 years, right? You guys have 9 years, so you're the top 9% just from that stat alone. Your current product vision, is that exactly what you set out to do, or did it change and iterate over the last 9 years or so?
Yeah, I mean, we started out on the dealer and the rental company side, right? So
Mm.
we started out with the vision of saying, how do we help dealers and rental companies be more proactive in helping their customers manage their equipment, whether it was rented or owned, so on and so forth. So our solutions were originally dealer facing, rental company facing. And then what we realized was that's not the whole picture, right? We need to be in the hands of the fleet owner in order, like I said, to have that um, team sport, right? To have all the stakeholders involved in making sure that that asset is not only up and running, but it's productive, you're maximizing production with it. And so there was a piece of the puzzle that was missing. We realized, which was being on the fleet owner side, and that's when we went to market with our equipment management solution for fleet owners and said, okay, well, now we're going to bring these two worlds together. And so where we've really evolved to is, from a go-to-market perspective, we go out and we onboard fleet owners, construction companies, mining, quarry, landscaping, you name it, right? Anybody with more than, 10, 15 assets. We onboard them onto our solution, and then we go back to and what they do is they load up all their dealers, their rental companies that they're working with in the system. And then we collectively, us and our fleet owner customer, go back to the dealers and the rental companies and say, hey, do you want to be connected? Do you want real-time visibility to help this fleet owner manage their rental experience or manage their owned experience with you? And that model works because now there's mutual benefit on both sides. So on the fleet owner side, they get better, faster service out of their rental companies and their dealers that they're working with. On the dealer and the rental company side, they get a much more efficient and effective way and a cost-effective way to cover that customer because they're seeing all this information in real time. And they also typically, as a result of that, gain greater share with that customer. Because obviously, especially in the rental space, everybody wants to hit the easy button, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want a rental company that's difficult to work with. I can't because the timing of it. I need to rent quickly, especially in short-term rental, day rental, 2-day week. You need somebody who can react quickly, who can be fast. And the only way to do that is to have that real-time visibility.
Mm. That's the other thing we found in our report we put out is there's this like data fog. You don't know where your equipment is. You don't know utilization rates. It's just like this fog that they live in, and being able to simplify the data, put it in one place, make it easy, put it in their face. This is what you need to do, right? Rental companies are at their best when they're talking to customers and serving customers. What they don't want to do is be going through spreadsheets and QuickBooks and 15 different systems, right? That's a lot of our mission too, is to how do you make this easy and simple and combine different systems into one place? That's really what we think about also. I'm curious, as a software CEO for 9 years, at what point did it flip when you go, okay, I'm not pushing this boulder up the hill with all my might, and it actually feels a little easier right now because starting off, you're selling vaporware and a vision, and you're trying to like piece together stuff. And where you are now, I imagine things are working and it's natural, and you're getting pulled into the market. At what point did you feel like, all right, we've really got something here, and I can sleep a little bit better at night?
Yeah, I think it's when you start to see proof of value, right? So when you start to see the metrics that you're driving, whether it's on the provider side, dealer rental company side, or whether it's on the fleet owner side, and you start to see metrics like, hey, like I mentioned before, this rental company went from a 50 share to an 85 share in a huge
Mm-hmm.
joint venture, and they're, uh, they're seeing the fruits of their labor. You
Hmm.
know, it's not taking 5 interactions with the customer to resolve an issue on a rental asset. It's taking one interaction now,
Hmm.
you know,
Hmm.
versus taking 5. On the fleet owner side, we're seeing, 30% increases in equipment uptime, both on, their rental assets that they have and their owned assets. Um, and so when you start to see those metrics, I truly believe that's when you start to say, we've turned the corner, right?
Hmm.
Uh, and
And
and you're not.
how long did that take you for you guys? Because like I've talked, I know a lot of founders, and some people never get there. Most companies actually never get there. Was that a couple years in, or is that 5, 7 years? I'm just curious when in your journey, because for us, seeing the metrics turn as well, and you sort of know when you've done it, but it wasn't the first year. Like when in your journey did you feel like, all right, now we've got product market fit, it's really working? How long did that take you guys?
Yeah, I think you definitely don't see it in the first year, right?
Yeah. Unless you're Uber and you're the one in a trillion, right? But the reality is you have to pivot multiple times, right?
Well, and I think also there's a change management aspect to this
Yeah.
because on both sides of the equation that we serve, there's a change management piece where people have to believe in it, they have to see it, they have to use and adopt it, and they need repetitions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I would say after the first year, we started to see bits and pieces of it, right?
Hmm.
So I'll give you an example. Like, we were enabling our rental companies and dealers that we were working with to inspect equipment and do rental check-in, check-out, um, so that they could recoup some of that cost potentially on that asset. And so we started to see some improvements there, right? And so that was just sort of like a little bit of a tip of the iceberg. And then obviously, like I said, it's evolved into sort of bigger impact type metrics like market share, share a wallet, um, increased sales on the fleet owner side, increased utilization of the rental assets, uptime on equipment. So it started to really kind of have those uh, bigger impact metrics, today versus, where we started with, kind of specific areas where we were seeing some either cost savings or seeing some either, driving some revenue.
Yeah, so you started with you saw some usage metrics, right? And you saw some growth there, but like where you are now, you're seeing the end result. Like rental
Yeah,
companies are growing market share.
yeah,
Like top line revenue is increasing, right?
yeah.
That's that's what you really want to prove, but like that doesn't happen day one, right? Because it takes reps, adoption, there's change management. As you know, people don't love change. So even if it's the best thing in the world, it takes time to
Well,
go
and
through
it's
that.
and it's really transformative in their business model
Hmm.
from a cost and a span of control perspective, where before you could say, hey, look, with these resources that we have today, we could manage this many customer accounts, right? Or this size of a rental fleet.
Hmm.
Um, and now with Activate and having that in the hands of our customers, we could use the same number of resources and manage 2x the rental fleet and 2x the customer base. And that's where you start to really see, because of all those efficiencies and because of having real-time visibility and access to what's going on your customer's job site.
One question I've been thinking about is obviously United and Sunbelt, they have tens of millions of dollars spending on their awesome IT teams building this really cool stuff. The average rental company is not spending millions of dollars building their own technology, right? Like how do the independents compete with the national players who are spending a lot more money on technology? I mean, it's hard. I mean, how do the independents compete with the national players?
Yeah, I think of two of our rental company customers that come to mind when you say that. Both of them are very small. One of them's a specialty rental house. Actually, they're both in Texas. One is a specialty rental house, and their fleet, by its very nature, is always going to be small, right? Um, it, you know, it may grow to some point, but because they're not, they are a specialty rental. They do, a lot with amphibious and marine type situations. Um, they're not going to be able to invest the tens of or hundreds of millions of dollars that the Uniteds and the Sun Belt in being able to connect to their customers in real time. And what Activate gives them is the ability to have a solution like that, and maybe even you know broader than what United or Sunbelt offers, to be able to connect to their customers at a fraction of the cost, right? So they're paying a couple $100 a month to have a solution like, a total control or like what a Sunbelt offers to its customers, and even beyond that. Um, but they're getting the power of being connected to their customers and being able to offer that same or better experience to their customers. Um, the other one, they are still a small rental outfit, but they have the opportunity to grow beyond that, right? So they're looking at Activate as really a growth platform for them, not just to be in the business of renting equipment, but to be in the business of sort of an outsourced or fractional equipment manager to their customers. So it's giving them another line of business, opening up a whole other line of business that they could be in with their customers, which in turn will drive more rental revenue. So they're using Activate to be the fractional or co-equipment manager for their customer. And by virtue of that, what they're seeing is, well, when their customer starts a new job and has a rental need, right? When the customer is expanding their fleet, right? Or needs to expand their fleet and they don't want to buy, they want to rent, and helping them as their co-equipment manager via the Activate platform to do that. Um, and so um, those two scenarios are very common for us, and we're seeing this more and more and more with the small to mid-size type rental companies, and even some of the larger, regional rental companies as well, especially ones that are looking to, maybe be acquired by a United or be acquired by a Sunbelt. It's helping them by having Activate and having a solution like this in place, embedded in their business model. It's helping them get greater valuations for their rental business, at the point that they would be looking to divest. So
And that's an interesting point. You're saying that some of the larger groups who are using technology platforms, leading in technology like Activate, they're actually getting higher premiums when they sell because they have a technology platform that's been able to prove some efficiencies, et cetera. Like I have never heard that before. It's interesting.
yeah, yeah, no doubt. And because if a United or a Sunbelt or Herc or any of the major folks who obviously we know are acquiring these
Yeah.
companies, um, they're looking for somebody who has that value add, right? Is
Hmm.
already delivering um, a premium experience to their customers, where they don't have, and they can assimilate that company much in a much easier fashion into their operations because that culture is already there,
Yeah.
and
So if
the
you think about
systems platforms are already there for them to execute it. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a great point. So I mean, if you think about an average medium size or small rental company, right? You've got several different options. You could buy something. All right, let me clarify. You could build something, right? You could build something like and spend a few million dollars or more building out a total control
right.
United there. That's an option, right? Option two is you could buy something off the shelf like Activate or other technology platforms. And option three is you do nothing. You keep running on spreadsheets, disparate systems, legacy softwares. Like obviously my view, right? Don't do option three. And option one is cool, but it's expensive. So probably don't do option one. Like you really need to find great technology partners who can do this for you. That's going to be the highest ROI. Like
Yeah,
what typically stops rental companies from moving from this? Oh, I'm going to use disparate pen and paper systems and clunky technology. What stops them from moving to next generation technology platforms?
I think it's because historically it's been an old business model for on the technology company side. So typically technology companies would come in and say, we're going to sell you enterprise software, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have to pay this big number upfront to onboard. And then you've got to pay this big number, which really isn't commensurate with who you are as a business and your usage. And I'll come back to, so when we approached this, we said, look, number one, we're not selling the rental company's software, right? What we're doing is we're giving them access and visibility, real-time access and visibility to their customers, and we're delivering that as a service, so they could better communicate with their customers and provide a better differentiated premium experience, bottom line. And so what that means for somebody like, that small rental company working with, or a couple of small rental companies we're working with in Texas, for guys like them, is their cost is literally just that monthly subscription fee. They want to be connected to their customers and deliver a better premium rental experience. Super easy. All you need to do is subscribe for a couple $100 a month. We turn on the lights and there's no implementation. You just start having real-time access and visibility into the job sites of your customers, and you start to be able to communicate with them and transact business. And that's the difference, is the barrier to entry historically that the technology companies have created has been so high that a lot of the small to mid-sized guys have been kind of scared off the commitments that they're asking them to make, sign the 2-year, 3-year, 4-year contract and invest all this money in the software platform. And then we're going to roll out a technology that you're going to have to manage or have resources internally within your small rental company to manage, which they don't have. And so what we're saying is, no, we're providing this as a service. You don't need any technology resources. All you need is you know, your rental sales rep and your yard manager and, a service writer maybe, or somebody like that, all the people you already have, right? And we're just going to turn the lights on and they're going to be able to see this, you know, air traffic control in real time, be able to land the planes much more efficiently than on spreadsheets. And you're not going to have to spend millions or tens of millions or hundreds of millions to do it.
Yeah, and I think partly to add on to that is there's some heartburn from people who've been in the industry long enough to remember the software company it's a 100K implementation fee, then it's another $100,000 on top of that, and you got to buy a server, and what's changed, and I hope people really, I think people are waking up to this. It's like technology has changed so quickly that not only is it better, faster, cloud-based, mobile responsive, it's also way cheaper to build software now. And because of that, you can pass on those savings to rental companies where you can get a amazing technology platform today for a fraction of what it was 10 or 20 years ago. And even look at this TV behind me, right? You can see it. This TV, it's a new TV. It's $300. This huge 65-inch TV. I was talking to my dad last night because we were talking about the cost of TVs. Probably the only thing it feels like that's gone down in price
Right.
lately. But we had a big 55-inch plasma TV, 15, 20 years ago. And I asked him how much it cost last night. It was $7,000. And now it's $300, the same TV.
Yeah.
And this is better. And I think that's like what people don't see necessarily is like, it's not like a linear thing where technology is 5%, 1% better every year. It's like stair step changing. Like
Yeah.
it's drastically better and faster. And that's what excites me is like, you don't need to spend millions of dollars. And by the way, in those three options I mentioned between buy, build, and do nothing, I would not build anything because although it is cheaper, et cetera, there's so many great technology platforms that exist today for a very affordable price that can like be game changing for your business, right? And I think that's sort of what you've realized is like we could build an awesome thing that competes with United and not have to do it at a very expensive price, right?
Right. And I think the other thing too is, and the difference is that for us, we'll tailor it and tailor it and customize it to all of our customers' individual needs, right? So for example, the couple of small mid-sized rental providers, that I mentioned as examples, we're putting in all their own, custom inspection forms, right, into their part of the solution. We're putting in all of their own specific integrations they have relative to their rental fleet, right? So whatever telematics they've outfitted their rental fleet with, all of those what I'll call configurations. It's part of a really fast sort of onboarding process, and we evolve those over time as their needs change and as their needs grow. And I think that's another big difference where historically folks were afraid to get into something because they're like, well, wait a minute. Not only am I going to have to manage this technology, but it's not going to fit quite right. It's going to be the suit that's sort of like the sleeves are a little bit small and, it's a little tight in the shoulders. Yes, I'm going to have to live with it, or it's a little size too big and it's, fits on top, but it's hoopy in the middle. That's kind of the fear as well, right? The secondary fear. The primary fear is I'm going to spend all this money, and I'm going to have to manage this thing and care and feed for it. And the second is, it's not going to fit quite right. So I know my spreadsheet fits just right today. Right.
Yeah. And there's in some level that is, I always say that is the first generation rental software, first generation anything, it's usually a spreadsheet, right? It's a good prototype, but there's a reason Google Sheets and Excel aren't selling rental platforms on Excel, right? Like
Yeah.
if they did, if it worked, they would be doing that. I'm thinking about like the technology changes you've seen in your life, right? With the internet and going from server to cloud, mobile, right? And obviously the one everyone talks about now is artificial intelligence, AI. Like, how do you see AI coming into the equipment rental industry in the next 5 to 10 years? Is that something that rental companies should be thinking about, and how can that be used to streamline operations?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is with AI and where I see that coming in, and I'll give one example, but there's obviously lots of different examples. But the example I just gave you of the rental company that is a customer of Activate's that's using our platform to co-manage equipment with their customers. So it's opened up this whole other line of business for them. Now, obviously, they're doing that today in a way that's, there's a body behind the computer screen and they're giving that customer advice and they're helping them decide, when to rent things and divest of certain pieces in their fleet and so on and so forth. But there's a massive opportunity to leverage AI to make that much more scalable for them, where they don't have to add bodies in those seats, the next
Mm-hmm.
fractional equipment manager and the next fractional equipment manager and the next fractional
Mm-hmm.
equipment manager. They can have those folks, but maybe one or two fractional equipment managers, rather than managing 50 accounts, can manage 500 accounts, right? And so it enables them to make that particular aspect of their business model much, much more scalable. And if you can co-manage equipment on 500 accounts, just think of the rental opportunity that's associated with that, right?
Mm.
Um, and
It's a bit,
that's where I see AI,
yeah.
coming into play, is this combination of the person at the provider and the ability to scale that service out in a really big way.
Yeah, it's all about leverage, right? It's funny though, and the same conversation, someone will say AI is going to take people's jobs, and at the same time they'll say we don't have enough good people. I'm like, well, I don't think
Right.
AI is necessarily taking jobs, but by the way, I think you need some help. And I think the other thing I've realized, we talked to a company who is moving from spreadsheets to Quipli after 30 years, and he was just like, I am going to have all this time. And I was like, well, what are you going to do? Like this is your job has been manually doing stuff, and now the system's just going to run for you. Like, what are you going to do with your time? He's like, I can actually go spend time with customers. I can go out in the field. I can go buy people lunch. I can go grow my business, right? So a lot of it's like, we're not eliminating jobs, we're eliminating AI, if used right, is taking away the repetitive, mundane tasks that no one really likes that allows you to do the high value work, which is spending time with customers.
Yeah. Yeah, it's 100%. We back in my consulting days, I worked at a go-to-market strategy firm, and we talked about lift, shift, and integrate, right? Elevate your high value, high quality resources into the high value add tasks, shift the low value add to automation, or in this case, AI. Um, and then make sure that that this is all integrated into the workflow, right? And integrated into the ecosystem. So we talked about lift, shift, and integrate, and this is really kind of a perfect example of lift, shift, integrate.
Mm. That's great. Well, I love what you guys are doing, Brian. And I appreciate you coming on today. Like, I think we share a similar vision. It's a connected future. That's how we move the whole industry forward. I guess final question for you. What would you say, like, what is the best piece of business advice, or one of, you probably have several pieces of great business advice you've gotten in your life, and how has that shaped your approach to building Activate?
Yeah. So, I guess a couple things. One is from an Activate perspective, um, it's really about staying true to your vision, right?
Mm.
Um, we certainly have taken, different twists and turns, along the way. Um, but the North Star has always been the North Star. And I think, we've always held true to what I'll call the verities, right? The truths that we know to be, you know, to be what they are, right? Which is, you know, it takes a village to raise a piece of equipment. It's a team sport, right? You know, um, and the future is a connected future,
Mhm.
right? Those are the things that we live by, and those are the things that shouldn't change. Now, how you get there is, certainly changes. But for me, it's, if you feel convicted in your vision, um, making sure that, because there's a lot of people along the way that are going to want to take you off that course,
Hmm.
and tell you, oh, wait, that's not the right vision. This is the right vision, or that's not the right North Star. Come look at this shiny object over here.
Hmm.
And it's really easy to get off path. And I'm sure you know that well. A lot of people have tried to drag you in a lot of different directions. And yeah, I guess kudos to you and all the founders that have, staying true to their North Star.
It's a game of itches. There's no shortcuts. A lot of it's just doing the same thing, the right thing over and over and over. I've said this every episode. My dad says 10 years of all-nighters to be an overnight success. You got one more year left in your 10-year journey. So
Yeah.
kudos to you for going this long. I know as a founder myself, I love it. It's fun. It's also really hard at times. And grit, persistence, that's what makes great companies. And obviously just really proud of what you've done in 9 years. So
Yeah.
thanks for coming on, Brian. And for folks listening, activateos.com if they want to learn more about Activate. Brian, you're on LinkedIn as well, so I'm sure people will reach out to you. But anyways, Brian, thanks for coming on. Love your vision. The future of equipment is connected. I share that as well. So appreciate all the knowledge you shared today. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Kyle. Appreciate it.